Okay, go ahead.
Welcome everyone to the 33rd, is that right, Mehmet? 33rd
Yeah.
meeting of this group. I'm grateful to have been invited to work with my friends on this and to see so many friends on here and also to see my old friend Bill Craig. I haven't seen him, we think, for at least 15 years. And the last time we met was in China, and today we meet in Turkey. And I'm glad to welcome you here. Thanks for participating in this. Uh, I think I think Bill Craig is probably the best known Christian philosopher in the Muslim speaking world. And I hear, do you know William Lane Craig? Everywhere I go, Bill. Do you know William Lane Craig? Do you know William Lane Craig? And, and I say, yeah, yeah, I know him, and but he doesn't make me call him William Lane. So
Right.
Bill is a very friendly, warm, kind man with an equally friendly wife, by the way. She came on both trips to China. We had a delightful time in China, and I hope, Bill, that soon after COVID, we can meet together again, but this time in Turkey.
Wonderful.
Our We're going to start not with the talk from Bill, but with a YouTube that he prepared, and we'll start with a video. We'll start with that, and then we'll take your questions. And again, as it is when I lead the discussion, if you have a question, just write it in the chat, and I'll try to take your questions in order. You can speak your question. You don't have to rely on the chat. But as you think of it, write your question out, and then and we'll try to go through in the chat the order that we have. So write your questions in the chat. If you want, I can just read it from the chat, or I'll try to ask you, do you want to say it? And so there'll be a chance for you to say it as well. So as we go through, go ahead and write your questions, and then at the end, we'll open it all up to discussion. All right, Mehmet?
Thank you.
A Zoom clap. Thank you, Bill. That was fantastic. Thanks for putting that together.
Sure.
Always a great communicator. Is MK still here? Are you here, MK? MK?
No, he's not, but he has asked me if I could write down the answer for him, if that's okay.
Okay. Do you want to ask his question too? I'm going to take his second question. I'll come back to the first. I'm sure a lot of people have his first question, Bill, but I want to come back to it in the end. And his first question is, why aren't you a Muslim?
Oh,
One true God. I'm sure a lot of people have that question, but let's save it for the end. And I think we'll start with Ennis's question. Ennis, go ahead. Why don't you ask yours first?
So thank you very much, Bill. My question is about your claim with the general theory of relativity. So as far as I know, you think that B theory of time is inconsistent with KALAM cosmological argument. And you seem to defend A theory of time is compatible with special theory of relativity.
Yes.
What do you think about general theory of relativity? It seems to me general theory of relativity makes even stronger case for B theory of time, because it's harder to make a Lorentzian interpretation of general theory of relativity. So if B theory of time is inconsistent with, at least partly with KALAM cosmological argument, and if general theory of relativity implies it, then it would become an argument against the KALAM cosmological argument.
yes. Fortunately,
One quick thing. I'm guessing not everyone knows what the A theory of time is, the B theory of time, the Lorentzian whatever. So, Bill, if you could just give us a little
all right.
primer, that would be great.
Philosophers of time have distinguished two radically different views of time. The first one, often called the A theory, is the sort of common sense view of time, that there's an objective difference between the past, the present, and the future, and that temporal becoming is a real and objective feature of the world. Things really do come into being and pass away. The B theory of time, however, says that there is no objective distinction between past, present, and future. It's merely relative. For the people in the year 1900, the events of 1900 are present, and we are in the future. But for the people in the year 2100, the events of 2100 are present, and we are in the past. And there is no objective way the world is with respect to past, present, and future. Moreover, temporal becoming is just an illusion of human consciousness. There really is no temporal becoming. All of the events in time are stretched out like a line, so that all events, whether past, present, or future to us, are equally real and existent, and nothing ever comes into being or passes away. Now, the question is, does modern science, and in particular, the general theory of relativity, favor one of these views of time rather than the other? And the answer is no. The general theory of relativity is capable of being understood in terms of either the A theory or the B theory. Now, because of simplicity and ease of exposition, the general theory is usually presented in physics books in terms of the B theory of time, space-time realism. On this view, gravitation is not a force. Rather, gravitation is simply a curvature of space-time. It's a warping of space-time. However, the general theory of relativity can also be presented in such a way that gravitation is not a geometrical notion like curvature of space-time, but rather it is a force, just like electromagnetism or the strong force or the weak force, these fundamental forces of nature. And on this view, temporal becoming is perfectly capable of being real. And in fact, when you apply the general theory of relativity to cosmology, a very remarkable thing happens. There emerges in the context of general relativistic cosmology something called cosmic time, which is not a coordinate of space-time events. Rather, it is a parameter that is, as it were, external to space-time and measures the duration of the universe from the moment of the Big Bang up until the present and beyond. And so temporal becoming can be ascribed to this cosmic time. It is the duration of the universe in which the universe unfolds as it expands. And physicists such as Steven Weinberg, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, have said explicitly that he believes that the geometrical space-time presentation of general relativity theory has actually hindered the quest for a unified theory of physics, because by not regarding gravitation as a force, it has impaired efforts to unify the four forces of nature into a single force carried by a single particle, so that this formulation of the universe has actually impeded scientific progress. Be that as it may, either way of understanding time is compatible with general relativity theory. And this is laid out in some detail in my book entitled Time and the Metaphysics of Relativity, which is available through Springer Verlag.
All right, thanks, Bill. MK seems to be back. MK, would you mind asking your second question? We'll come back to your first at the end, but the second one about Al-Ghazali. MK, you're muted.
Yeah, hello. Sorry, I had a phone call I had to go. Sorry. Hello, Dr. Will. It's
Can you
nice
put
to be
your
here.
video on? Would you mind?
All right. Hang on. Is it working?
Yeah, we can see your floor.
Well,
Nice floor, MK.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So yeah, no. So I had a misunderstanding regarding the creation of the creation of the universe by Al-Ghazali, right? So basically, as I understand, that he was saying that, you know, talking about the eternal creation, is that the eternality of the world, it has a cause, it has a causer, i.e. God, right? But there is that God is al-Khalaq. So we have to understand the attributes of God is al-Khalaq, that he's continuously creating, right? So from that we say that the universe is caused, but it has like components that were pre-caused. Is that correct, sir?
no, that's not the way I read him, at least. In his Tahafut al-Falasifa, Ghazali argues that the world had a beginning and has a boundary, a first temporal boundary, which he calls the eternal. And I think that for Ghazali, the eternal is a state of timelessness, which describes God's existence. And Ghazali believed that a timeless God could, in fact, create a temporal universe with a beginning. And he goes to some significant extent to argue this point against people like Ibn Rushd and the other, Ibn Sina, the other Muslim philosophers influenced by Neoplatonism, who did not believe in a temporal creation and a beginning of the universe. So unless I'm mistaken, it's incorrect to think that for Ghazali, there was anything prior to the beginning of the universe. That was just what he calls the eternal.
I guess the creation, I mean, I think it depends on what we refer to by the creation. So is it the universe is, does that consist of the heavens and like the firmaments and heaven and hell, the throne of God? I mean, it depends, I guess, what do you refer to by saying creation? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, he actually uses the word world, that the world had a beginning. So, I mean, I would take that to refer to anything that is not God. So that would include things like the heavens and angels and things of that sort. The same arguments against an infinite regress of events would apply to such realities, such temporal realities. So insofar as he thinks that the world had a beginning, it seems to me that he's committed to saying that God alone is eternal and is the source of the world.
I guess, yeah, sorry. No, I guess that brings us to the first question, if I may, about God being eternal and that he is one and only self-sufficient, is like you said in the video, right? So I think that brings us to the first question, as in light of John 17:3. Would you agree with Jesus that the Father alone is the only true God?
Well, as a Christian, I do believe in the deity of Christ, but I think that for Jesus, in his human nature, he did worship and serve God the Father. For him, his God was the God of the Old Testament, his heavenly Father. But he also made claims whereby he put himself in the very place of God. And that was what forced these early Jewish monotheists to so radically revise the Hebrew understanding of God so as to permit a multiplicity of persons.
Okay, so you do agree with Jesus that the Father is the only true God, right? Or
well, I just said that I think Jesus is God, but it's not as though there is more than one God. There's more than one person in the single being that is God.
Yeah, but I'm saying that in the chapter of 17, it says that Jesus talking to the Father, the person. He's saying that the person, the Father, is the only true God. So this is what I was asking you about.
Yes.
So
Well,
you
yes.
agree? Yeah. So you agree with Jesus that the Father, the person, the Father, is the only true God.
Yes, that's right, so long as you don't understand that to be an affirmation of Unitarianism, because Jesus, I think, also made claims that put himself in the place of God. So there's only one true God, but it is the Father, it is the Son, it is the Holy Spirit, I would say.
I guess, like when we're talking,
That's probably enough on that question, MK. So
sure, okay,
we'll move on to Saf.
Okay.
Are you ready for yours?
thank you.
Yeah. Hi there, Professor Craig. Thank you for that video, and now obviously the live Q&A. It's a pleasure to finally actually speak to you directly, having read your works since being an undergrad and even until now. So it's a real pleasure and honor. Some people raise the objection against the first premise of the Kalam cosmological argument by saying it's ambiguous, or a stronger claim that it commits a logical fallacy. So some say that, okay, so the first premise, whatever begins to exist has a cause, could either mean that everything that begins to exist has some cause or other. So for any x, there is a y such that x is caused by y, let's say. Or it can mean that there is something which is the cause of everything that begins to exist. So that is, there is some y such that for every x or any x, x is caused by y. So, so they say that these two statements aren't logically equivalent.
Right.
The first statement that for any x, there is a y such that x is caused by y, that follows from the second, which is the second meaning, second possible meaning, which is there is a y, there is some y, such that for any x, x is caused by y. But if everything has some cause or other, it doesn't follow that there is one and the same thing, which is the cause of everything that begins to exist. So they say it has that, it commits that fallacy. So what do you think about that objection?
Oh, I think it's just a total mess, logically. Premise one is a universal generalization. For all x, if x began to exist, then x has a cause. It's very straightforward. It's just like all men are mortal. For any x, if x begins to exist, then x has a cause.
So you think there's no ambiguity in that first premise?
Not at all. No, it's a clear universal generalization, just like all men are mortal. For any x, if x is a man, then x is mortal.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Our next guest does not have a microphone, but he's asked like 37 questions over here, Bill. I'm not sure which ones I should ask, but
pick one.
I'll pick one here. What is the best approach to shoulder off the epistemic concerns of the likes of Kant and Hume regarding the nature of causality, undermining the first modal principle, namely the causal principle?
Yeah. Well, let me say a couple of things. With respect to Hume, David Hume actually believed in premise one, the causal premise. He wrote to John Stewart a letter in which he says, "Allow me to tell you that I never affirmed anything so absurd as that something could begin to exist without a cause. I only maintained, and I can't remember the exact quote, I only maintained that our source of this is neither intuition nor demonstration, but some other source." In other words, he didn't think you could prove the causal principle, but he clearly believed it and affirmed it. And as for Kant, I actually appeal to Kant in the book to justify the causal principle, because Kant thought that the causal principle was a synthetic a priori truth. That is to say, it's not analytic, it's not true by definition, and yet it is characterized by universality and necessity. The reason for Kant's skepticism lies in his bifurcation of reality into noumena and phenomena, that the categories don't give us knowledge of things in themselves. Now, almost nobody accepts that bifurcation between reality and appearance. That's, I think, a real weak point in Kant's thinking. Indeed, it may even be incoherent. But if we think that the categories of the mind do apply to reality, that they do give us knowledge of reality and not mere appearances, then that says that this causal premise is not only true, it's necessarily true. So the point on which Kant should be attacked is not the causal principle. He should be criticized on the basis of this radical bifurcation between appearance and reality, which I think is difficult to sustain. And then I give 3 positive arguments as well in favor of the causal principle that we shouldn't neglect.
All right, thanks, Bill. I'm going to add, this is a little bit off topic, but you write about lots of things and they've read what you've written and you're here. So this person, another one of his questions was, what are your thoughts on predestination? He's asked several questions on free will. Like, what do you think about libertarian free will? And then asked, what about predestination? Do you think that free will is a problem or foreknowledge would be a problem for free will? Anyway, there's in the neighborhood of free will, there's a lot of questions in the neighborhood of free will.
I do believe in libertarian human freedom, yes. And the question then would be, is this compatible with divine sovereignty and predestination? And here I would commend the work of a 16th century Catholic theologian named Luis Molina. Molina developed a theory called middle knowledge, which he used to reconcile divine sovereignty and human freedom in opposition to the Protestant reformers like Luther and Calvin, who had denied libertarian freedom. And Molinism, as it's called, this theology of Luis Molina is now experiencing a tremendous resurgence in the West among Christian philosophers. People like Alvin Plantinga, Thomas Flint, Alfred Freddoso, and many others have defended and advocated Molina's theory of middle knowledge. Now, I'm not going to go into it right now unless you want me to, but I would say I adhere to Molinism and I've defended it in many published works. If you're interested in looking at one of those, the little book, The Only Wise God, published by Baker, now available through Wipf and Stock, I think I would recommend. It's only 110 pages long, and it tries to explain the compatibility of divine foreknowledge and human freedom, and includes a chapter on middle knowledge.
All right, thanks, Bill. I thought you were going to say it was only $110.
Oh, no.
It wouldn't be a surprise these days, but...
No, it wouldn't. Oh, gosh.
All right, Nesser, do you have a question? Nesser Ali Titimur, are you there?
Yes. Actually, I didn't want to ask it as a question. I just attached a paper there on the...
Okay, you don't have a question. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Then Mehmet, I'm not even going to try Mehmet. Akafitchi.
Yes, it's true. No problem.
Okay, go ahead. There's 2 Mehmets, that's why, and Mehmet Bolgan, you're next. So after that Mehmet, you're Mehmet 1, you're Mehmet 2. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. First, thank you very much, Mr. Craig. I want to ask, what if one day we can observe that a host exists in our Zoom suddenly? I mean, I don't mean the real host, but I mean the quantum fields or some particles, whatever we meant. would the
Now,
Kalam
could I
cosmological
ask you to
argument
repeat
be
it?
cancelled?
I need to
Or
ask
in
you to
that case, if
He wants to know if a horse appears suddenly
so
in
can
your room. Right, Mehmet? So is that right? And then can you ask your question again?
yes, but can I continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I lost the connection. I can't hear you.
Yes.
What if one day we can observe that a horse exists in our room suddenly? The argument are cancelled. If our answer is not, why scientific evidences are mentioned in the Kalam cosmological argument?
Now, if I understood the question, it was what if we saw or found something like a horse that popped into being and it, to all appearances, did not have a cause? What would I say? I would say that if such a thing happened, then it does have a cause, that it's metaphysically impossible for something to come into being without a cause. So that horse was either created by a radically improbable quantum fluctuation, or else it was created by God for some reason that we don't know. But I would not think that such a thing came into being with literally no cause at all.
Actually, this is what I mean, because also I agree with you, but the question is then the mentioning scientific evidences of the beginning of the universe is a little bit meaningless. Do you get what I mean?
No, Kelly, can you help me? I'm having a little trouble understanding.
I don't follow it exactly. Is anyone doing better than I am here? Anyone want to help?
Can't you hear me, hocam?
I don't think that it
I'll
would
tell
make
you what, Mehmet, why don't you ask it in Turkish? Let's see if that helps. Go ahead and ask in Turkish. And
Okay.
Shoaib, will you Shoaib doesn't know Turkish. Mehmet Bolgan, will you be our translator? Help us out. Go ahead.
Ahmet Akif, could you ask in Turkish, please? Your question?
Tamam, okey. Hocam diyorum ki, yani eğer biz bir gün şeyi gözlemleyebilirsek, bir atın ya da bir partikülün aniden ortaya çıktığını gözlemleyebilirsek ve bu durumda biz yine de bu olayın kelam kozmolojik argümenti iptal etmediğini söylüyorsak, demek ki bu olay scientific gözleminin dışında bir şey olması lazım. Yani bizim verdiğimiz cevaplar. Dolayısıyla kelam kozmolojik argümanın içinde bilimsel destekleyicilerden faydalanmak biraz saçma gibi gözüküyor. Yani daha çok philosophical way'den kanıtlamak lazım gibi geliyor benim.
Okay, he said, thank you, Mehmet. He said that classical Kalam cosmological argument was a little bit philosophical and metaphysical argument. But your argument also considers scientific explanations. So how could we reconcile scientific explanations? Because science usually works with experiments and observations. So how could we benefit, or how could we reconcile metaphysical side of the argument and scientific side of the argument? In other words, science never proved God's existence or metaphysical side of the argument, because science worked with tests, observations, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to add something. Sorry.
Ya, Mehmet, lütfen dur da bir anladı, onu cevap versin, tamam?
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, please, William Craig.
As I present the argument, it is primarily a metaphysical argument, and the primary reasons for accepting both premises are metaphysical. But I think it is remarkable that they are also confirmed by modern science. And so I think of this as primarily metaphysical, but then having scientific confirmation. And even if somehow the scientific confirmation were removed, for example, that the steady state model of the universe were shown to be tenable, that would not affect the philosophical arguments for the premises. It would merely say that it's not confirmed by science. But remarkably, I think these premises are.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Mehmet?
Okay, thank you very
Mehmet
much.
2, you're next.
Oh, okay, maybe I can add one more question depending on this answer. I usually teach my students with your articles, especially Kalam Cosmological Argument. I present your argument as a renovation, as an update. How could we update? How could we revive Kalam according to contemporary science, according to some philosophical considerations? But usually my students have said that how could we make sure that science one day is going to change like old days? So how could we depend on science, because it's always changing? Maybe one day Big Bang theory is going to be changed. You know, there are some theories such as string theory. They try to solve a singularity problem, as you know. So the second phase of my question is that usually Kalam cosmological argument considers initial creation, right? But when we look at classical mutakellimun, they also considered continuous recreation. I mean, the universe is being created right now. So do you have any scientific theory to make sure that the universe is being created right now, such as, for instance, quantum theory implies that time is discontinuous structure, something like that? Thank you again.
Sure. So, theologians have distinguished between creation of the universe and conservation of the universe. Creation is the initial act of bringing the universe into being. Conservation would be God's preserving the universe over time. And the Kalam cosmological argument, as I presented, is wholly about creation. It has nothing to do with conservation. So it's quite compatible with God's conservation of the universe in being over time, but it's compatible with saying that God doesn't do it. It just doesn't speak to that issue. Now, as for the provisionality of the scientific confirmation of the premises, that was what I was trying to address with that quotation by Sean Carroll right at the end of the video, where Carroll says science doesn't prove things. It's not in that business. Rather, it assesses theories in terms of theoretical virtues like explanatory power, fit with the empirical data, simplicity, plausibility, and so forth. And my argument there is that when judged by those criteria, the laws of thermodynamics and the expansion of the universe are very well established scientific facts. And so while science is always provisional, I wouldn't be worried that these conclusions are going to be overturned. It's possible, but you've got to go with the best evidence that you have. And in this case, the evidence is pretty secure.
Abdullah's question is pretty close, I think. So let's go to you, Abdullah.
Thanks, Kelly. Dr. Craig, thank you so much for joining us. I'm a huge fan of your work. I just had a quick question. So all the arguments that we've kind of talked about today and in general, especially the KCA, they determine a cause of the existence of the universe that's timeless, immaterial, so-and-so. Can we establish from these arguments that the God we're talking about is also a personal God and not a deistic God?
Well, now, let me just make a correction. The God of deism is a personal God. Deists believed that God is a personal, creator of the universe who brought the universe into being and established moral laws that govern human behavior, but they didn't think that he had revealed himself in any special way, like through prophets or a special book or anything like that. But the God of deism is a personal being. Now, I give three arguments for the personhood of the uncaused cause of the universe, though these are not mentioned in those animated videos that I showed because of reasons of time. The first reason is inspired by Al-Ghazali. I think it's a brilliant argument. Ghazali said that the only way to explain the beginning or the rise of a temporal effect with a beginning from a timeless cause is if that cause is a personal agent endowed with freedom of the will, who can therefore arbitrarily choose to create a cause with a beginning without any antecedent determining conditions. And I think Ghazali's argument is very powerful, and I have never seen it addressed by any critic of the argument. The second argument would be that the cause of the universe must be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. And there are only two candidates that I can think of that would meet that description. One would be an abstract object, like a number or a property. The other would be an unembodied mind or consciousness. But you see, an abstract object by definition is causally a feat. It cannot cause anything. It has no causal powers. So in order to explain how the universe was caused to come into being, you need an unembodied personal agent. And then the third argument would be one given by Richard Swinburne, where he says there are two types of causal explanation. One would be by appealing to initial conditions and natural laws. The other would be by appealing to an agent and his volitions. So for example, if I walk into the kitchen and I see some water boiling on the stove and I say to my wife, Jan, why is the water boiling? She could either say, well, the heat of the flame is being conducted by the copper bottom of the kettle to the water, causing its kinetic energy to increase so that some of the molecules are thrown off in the form of steam. Or she could say, I put it on to make a cup of tea. Would you like some? And Swinburne says either of those is a perfectly legitimate form of causal explanation. But in the case of the first physical state of the universe, there cannot be an explanation in terms of initial conditions and scientific laws, because it is the first physical state of reality. And therefore, if it has a cause, it can only be explained in terms of a personal agent and his free volitions. So I think those are three very powerful arguments for thinking that we do not simply arrive at an uncaused cause of the universe, but at a personal creator.
Thank you so much.
All right, Shoaib?
Hey, Bill. So I have a question about oscillating universes. So since the Kalam cosmological argument relies on a temporal regression of sorts, if time started with the creation of the universe, do you think that automatically rules out the validity or possibility of oscillating universes, scientifically speaking?
Did you say oscillating?
Oscillating, yeah.
Oscillating.
Yeah.
I take it that that's not ruled. Well, it would rule that out philosophically, yes, because, well, let me back up. There could be a finite number of prior oscillations, but there could not be an infinite number of prior oscillations if the philosophical arguments are sound. The series of oscillations would itself have to be finite and have a beginning. And then the second point would be, is that the hypothesis of a universe oscillating from eternity faces enormous scientific problems. These models were tried during the 1970s. especially by the Russians, and they came to be uniformly rejected as incompatible with the physical evidence. So I don't think there's much hope for avoiding the beginning of the universe by appeal to oscillating universes.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I don't know how to pronounce this because there are no vowels, but PSRC.
Yeah, it's by David Jalajal. That's his company name.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay.
What is your name?
David Jalajal.
Oh, David. Okay. Thanks, David.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I'm talking about a volitional God. I'm assuming a volitional God that is timeless and who creates what he wills. If this timeless creator who is not in time can create an infinity of events or objects or whatever, each one being originated, hadith, so nothing is causally caused by what came before it. Why can't this allow for an infinite amount of events going back into the past and the future, coming from the vantage point of a timeless being who puts all events in their places?
Yeah.
It seems like the infinite regress argument, which is used to cancel out that infinite universe, works as long as you assume a causal relationship between the events in the universe, like in your hotel event. But if it's an uncaused creator causing it all, no event is a cause of the other. So there's no infinite regress. It's just for free will of a God putting things in infinite time. Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. As I formulated the argument, I'm very careful not to say that I'm arguing against an infinite regress of causes. I never say that. What I say is I argue against an infinite regress of events, so that even if the events are not causally connected, as long as they are temporally ordered, the arguments against an infinite regress of events will apply to them and require that the series of events had to have a beginning.
But isn't that incompatible with the assumption of an occasionless creation where a God can create anything and he's from outside of time, he's not in time. So if he can create something at a moment like 1,000,000 years in the past, he could create a moment 1,000,000,000 years in our past. He can right now create a moment 1,000,000,000,000 years in our past, and there's no limit to what God can do in both directions. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Don't confuse the potential infinite with the actual infinite. I certainly agree that for any finite number n, God could have created n+1 events instead of n. So instead of 1,000,000,000,000, he could have created 1,000,000,001 or 1,000,000,002. But that's not to say that he could have created an actually infinite number of events. That's part of the paradoxical nature of the actual infinite. Someone mentioned earlier updating the Kalam cosmological argument in terms of the scientific evidence. It's important to understand that what I've also done is updated it philosophically as well in light of modern mathematics, set theory, and transfinite arithmetic. And the insights of modern mathematics into the nature of the actual infinite, I think, helps to shed light on the impossibility of an actually infinite past. And to say that God could not have created an actually infinite past is no inhibition upon God's power, because we normally do not think that God has the power to do things that are metaphysically impossible.
Can I mention one final thing?
Hey, I think we should stop here. David, we have a number of questions, so we need to end pretty soon. So I'm going to move on to Nimet, and I'm going to ask. I ask it in the chat. Would everyone please put their video on? Turn your video on. I like to take pictures of the groups. It'll be a nice memento for Bill.
Yes.
But I hate to have people's names sitting on here or initials. So if everyone could quick turn on their picture. I think a couple of you said you couldn't do it. That's okay. MK, AFY, that would be great. And then, and while I'm taking a couple pictures and you're smiling and looking engaged, Nimet can ask her question.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Professor Craig, for joining us and for your presentation. I wanted to ask a related question.
Does anyone know how to take a picture on a Mac?
Command Shift 3. Command Shift 3.
Command Shift 3. Okay, got it. Okay, go ahead. Give me some smiles.
Sure. Professor, I was wondering, related to the question of an infinite series of events, whether causally connected or not, whether on a presentist view of time, we would consider this an actual infinite, and relatedly, in the animated illustration, you made a modification of the Hilbert's hotel experiment by room, but this seems to assume that the past events continue to exist along with the present ones, and that's my understanding of that iteration of the thought experiment, is that that is what amounts ultimately to the actual infinite, right? But if you're to assume that those past events go out of existence and the only ones that exist are the current ones, does that amount to an actual infinite when you have, you have an infinite series of events, but only the present ones are considered to actually exist?
Well, you're quite perceptive to have detected that element in the animated video. I added that because of this concern. I myself am a presentist who thinks that only things that presently exist are real. But it seems to me that this is no obstacle to numbering things in the past. For example, if we say, how many United States presidents have there been? Well, there have been 45. And the fact that they don't all exist now is no obstacle at all to counting them. And so similarly, if the past never had a beginning, the number of events that have existed in the past would be actually infinite, and I think would be attended then by all of the absurdities that David Hilbert lays out. But if you have trouble with that, then this modification of the argument, which has been proposed by a Chinese philosopher named Andrew Lok from Singapore, Andrew gets around the problem by saying it's clearly possible to have a hotel under construction where you add one room a year without a beginning. And he asked, how many rooms then would there now be in this hotel? And the answer would be an actually infinite number of rooms. So if it is possible that there could be an actually infinite regress of events, it would be possible to have a simultaneously existing actually infinite number of rooms in the hotel today. And I think that that is a really good answer to this concern that all of the events of the past don't coexist.
All right, we're going to take one more question from A. Arif Adalar. Okay, you're our last one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Well, my question is, you didn't mention in the video, but in your book, 5 Arguments for God, you're supporting the Kalam cosmological argument with the Occam's razor. And I'm not sure that how we can use Occam's razor for this argument. I mean, simplicity can change to person that you talk and the purpose of explanation. Imagine if we all deny God, there wouldn't be a theology or philosophy of religion at all. So why do we need to use Occam's razor?
I think the only place that I appeal to Occam's razor in the argument is in answer to the question, how do we know that there are not more than one cause of the universe, a plurality of gods? And there, I think Occam's razor is validly applied. This is a principle that says you are not justified in multiplying causes beyond necessity. You are only justified in positing such causes as are needed to explain the effect. And one cause of the universe is all you need to explain the beginning of the universe. And therefore, it would be gratuitous and unjustified to posit a plurality of such causes. That's the only place, I think, that I've used Occam's razor. And that seems to me to be a very legitimate application of this explanatory guideline.
Then can we use the same logic for the personality of God? I mean, rather than three, isn't it more plausible to claim one personality by using Occam's razor?
Well, if I were arguing for a plurality of persons in God, I think you're quite right. But this argument, as you know, doesn't establish a Christian concept of God. It proves a kind of generic theism. I say it leads to an uncaused, timeless, spaceless, immaterial, enormously powerful, personal creator of the universe. And that is a conclusion which resonates with Jews and Christians and Muslims. Indeed, I find the intersectarian appeal of this argument to be one of the attractive features of the argument. So my reasons for believing in a plurality of persons in God would be unconnected to the Kalam cosmological argument. It would have more to do with the historical Jesus and his personal claims.
Thank you. Great honor to talk with you.
All right, I think this is a good place to stop. You know, Bill, I was reminded about halfway through your talk that there's a lot to be said about nothing, or really almost nothing. But there's a lot of jokes to be made about nothing. It's astounding what people do say about nothing.
It is.
And I'm glad you had some fun with it. And I'm glad we got to be the recipients of that.
Good.
I want to thank you for joining us here. I want to thank everybody here for being part of this great discussion. I think we could just keep talking on and on and on, but it's time to bring it to a close. And hopefully, inshallah, the next discussion will be all of us in person in Turkey after COVID. Thanks, my friends.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I embrace you all, and I'm so glad for the opportunity to have been with you today.
Thank you, Dr. Craig.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Craig.